caught my wife cheating before our wedding, but I still walked down the aisle. The night before my wedding, I found my fiancé with another man. I didn't scream. I didn't punch him. I didn't even tell her that I knew. I just stood outside that hotel room, listening to the woman I was supposed to marry whisper, "He can't ever find out." And the strangest part. The next morning I put on my suit, walked into that church and waited for her at the altar. Everyone thought I was about to marry the love of my life. Nobody knew I had already discovered her secret. And I had one reason for walking down that aisle. My name is Ethan, and this is how my wedding day became the biggest lie of my life. I met Claire 3 years before our wedding. She was the kind of woman who could walk into a room full of strangers and somehow make everyone feel like they had known her forever. We met at a friend's birthday party in Chicago. I wasn't even supposed to be there. My best friend Marcus had practically dragged me out of my apartment. Claire was standing near the kitchen, laughing about something, holding a glass of wine. When our eyes met, she smiled. "Are you always this quiet?" she asked. "Only around people I don't know." She laughed. "Then I guess you better get to know me." That was Claire. Confident. Funny. Warm. Within a few months, I was completely in love with her. We moved in together after a year. We talked about buying a house. We talked about kids. We even argued about where we'd spend Christmas when we got old. Normal couple stuff. When I proposed, Claire cried so hard she could barely say yes. For the next 6 months, our lives became wedding planning. Venue. Flowers. Guest list. Catering. Suit fittings. Everything was perfect. Or at least I thought it was. 2 weeks before the wedding, Claire started acting differently. She began taking her phone everywhere, even into the shower. She turned the screen away whenever I walked into the room. At first, I ignored it. I didn't want to become the jealous fiancé who suspected his partner over every notification. Then one night I asked her, "Is everything okay?" She looked at me for a second too long. "Of course. You seem distracted." "I'm just stressed about the wedding." I believed her. Because when you love someone, you don't immediately assume they're lying. You give them the benefit of the doubt. Sometimes that's love. Sometimes that's stupidity. 3 days before the wedding, Claire told me she needed to meet one of her bridesmaids after work. She said she'd be home around 9. At 9:30 she wasn't home. At 10:15 still nothing. I called. Straight to voicemail. Around midnight, I finally heard the front door. Claire walked in quietly. She froze when she saw me sitting on the couch. "Why are you still awake?" I was worried. She dropped her purse. "I'm sorry, my phone died." I looked at her. There was something different about her. A nervousness I couldn't explain. But I didn't push. The next afternoon, I was supposed to pick up the final wedding documents from our venue. On my way there, I realized I'd left my wallet at home. I turned around. And that's when I saw Claire's car. It was parked outside a hotel, about 20 minutes from our apartment. I almost kept driving. I should have. But something inside me said, "Stop." So I parked. I walked into the lobby. I didn't know what room she was in. Then I saw her. Claire stepped out of the elevator. And she wasn't alone. A man walked beside her. Tall, dark hair, maybe early 30s. He put his hand on her waist. She smiled at him. Not the polite smile she gave strangers. The smile she used to give me. My stomach dropped. They walked toward a hallway. I followed them from a distance. Then I heard him say, "Are you sure you're still going through with this?" Claire whispered, "I don't have a choice anymore." He kissed her, and she kissed him back. I stopped breathing. For a few seconds, the entire hotel disappeared. There was just the sound of my own heartbeat. I followed them until they entered a room. The door closed. I stood there. 10 seconds. 20. A minute. Then I heard her voice through the door. "He thinks everything is fine." The man laughed. "What happens after the wedding?" Claire answered, "Then I'll figure it out." That was the moment something inside me broke. Not because she had kissed another man, but because she had already imagined a future where I was still completely unaware. I walked back to my car. I sat behind the steering wheel for almost an hour. I didn't cry. I didn't call her. I didn't confront the guy. I just stared at the dashboard. The wedding was tomorrow. My family had flown across the country. Her family had spent thousands of dollars. The venue was booked. Hundreds of people were coming. But none of that mattered anymore. I went home. Claire came back 2 hours later. She walked through the door smiling. "Hey, future husband." I looked at her. "Hey." She kissed my cheek. And I let her. That night she fell asleep beside me. I stayed awake until sunrise. I kept thinking about one question. Why? Why would she do this? Was it the first time? How long had it been happening? And who was that man? I eventually found out his name. Daniel. And the answer to the last question made everything worse. Daniel wasn't some random guy. He was Claire's former boyfriend. They had dated for nearly 4 years before me. Claire had always told me their relationship ended badly. She said she couldn't stand him. She said he was manipulative. She said she never wanted to see him again. Apparently, I had been living inside a lie. But I still didn't confront her. Instead, I went to the wedding. People often imagine revenge as screaming. Sometimes revenge is silence. I walked into that church. My parents were smiling. Claire's parents were crying. Marcus stood beside me and whispered, "You okay, man?" I looked at him. Yeah. It was the biggest lie I'd ever told. Then the doors opened. Claire walked down the aisle. She looked beautiful. Everyone stood. She looked at me and smiled. And for 1 second, I remembered the woman I thought she was. Then she reached me. The priest began speaking. "Do you, Ethan?" I looked at Claire. She squeezed my hand. And I realized something. If I exposed her right there, I'd destroy both families. If I walked away, I'd become the villain in everyone's story. So I made a different choice. I said, "I do." Claire smiled. Then came her turn. "I do." Everyone applauded. We kissed. And the room erupted. Nobody knew that 24 hours earlier, I'd watched my future wife kiss another man. At the reception, Claire danced with me. She whispered, "I can't believe we're married." I smiled. Neither can I. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, we returned to the hotel we'd booked for our wedding night. Claire walked into the room and kicked off her shoes. She looked exhausted. I sat on the edge of the bed. She smiled. "What?" I reached into my jacket and placed my phone on the table. The screen was already open. There was a photo. Claire. Daniel. Outside the hotel room. Kissing. Her face went completely white. "What is that?" I said nothing. She picked up the phone. Her hands started shaking. Ethan. Who is he? She couldn't answer. Claire, who is he? It's complicated. No. I stood up. It's actually very simple. She started crying. I was going to tell you. When? She looked down. After the wedding. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because sometimes you laugh when something hurts too much. You were going to marry me and then tell me. I was confused. You weren't confused when you kissed him. She covered her face. Then she finally said, His name is Daniel. I know. She looked at me. You knew. I knew everything. The room went silent. Then she asked, Why did you marry me? That was the question I had been waiting for. I walked toward the door. Because I wanted you to understand something. She stared at me. I continued. Yesterday, you thought you were choosing between me and Daniel. She said nothing. But you were wrong. I opened the door. You were choosing whether you wanted to be honest with me. I stepped outside. And you already made your choice. Claire ran after me. Ethan, please. I turned around. I loved you enough to marry you. She cried. But I respect myself enough to leave you. I handed her the wedding ring. Then I walked away. The marriage lasted less than 24 hours. The divorce wasn't easy. There were lawyers, family arguments, people who blamed me, people who blamed Claire. Some relatives told me I should have exposed her at the altar. Others said I should have forgiven her. But eventually I understood something. I didn't walk down that aisle because I was weak. I walked down it because I needed to see the truth with my own eyes. And when I did, I stopped fighting for someone who had already stopped fighting for me. A year later, I heard Claire and Daniel had broken up. Apparently, their relationship didn't survive outside the secrecy. I never asked why. I didn't care anymore. I had started rebuilding my life. New apartment, new friends, therapy, and eventually I started dating again. But this time, I learned something I wish I'd understood before my wedding day. Trust isn't about believing someone when everything looks perfect. Trust is about what someone does when they know they could get away with lying. Claire had the chance to tell me the truth. She didn't. And that was the real betrayal. Not the kiss. Not Daniel. Not even the affair. It was standing beside me at the altar, while knowing she had already broken the promise she was about to make. So if there's one thing I learned from the worst day of my life, it's this. Never confuse loving someone with having to stay with them. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is accept that the person you planned your future with was never the person you thought they were. And sometimes, the wedding isn't the beginning of the marriage. It's the moment you finally see the truth and walk away.